Soon after Daniel and his companions entered the service of the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar had a remarkable dream. Although the king's mind was deeply impressed, he found it impossible, when he awoke, to recall the particulars. In his perplexity, Nebuchadnezzar assembled his advisors and besought their help. Dissatisfied with their evasive answer, the king commanded his wise men with threats of death to tell him the dream and its interpretation. Filled with fear for the consequences of their failure, the magicians remonstrated that there is no one upon planet Earth that can show this to the king. The king was very angry, and he commanded to destroy all the wise men of Babylon. Among those who were sought for by the officers were Daniel and his friends. Now they submitted themselves anew to the judge of the earth, pleading that he would grant them deliverance. The God that they honored now honored them. To Daniel was revealed the king's dream and its meaning. And before we move on with the story of the three images, let us have an affirmation of faith, and this time the parable of the good ship Faith. And I read some more. There is no need to doubt, to be fearful that the work of God will not succeed. God is at the head of his work, and he will set everything in order. If matters need adjusting at the head of the work, God will attend to that, and he will work to correct every wrong. Let us have faith that God is going to carry this noble ship. Let us have faith that God is going to carry this noble ship, which bears the people of God, safely into port. And quoting from the scriptures, Hebrews chapter 11, without faith, it is impossible to please God. For he that comes to God must believe that he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. And I go back to the writings again. Because of unconsecrated workers, things will sometimes go wrong. You may weep over the result of the wrong course of others, but do not worry. The work is under the supervision of the blessed Master. All he asks is that the workers shall come to him for their orders and then obey his directions. All parts of the work, our churches, our missions, our Sabbath schools, which are diminishing in attendance right throughout Indiana, and I'm sure elsewhere. I think I better read this again. All parts of the work, our churches, our missions, our Sabbath schools, our institutions are carried upon his heart. Why worry? The intense longing that we have to see the church imbued with life must be tempered with entire trust in God. Let no one overtax his God-given powers in an effort to advance the Lord's work more rapidly. The power of man cannot hasten the work. With this must be united the power of heavenly with the power of heavenly intelligences. Even if all the workers now bearing the heaviest burdens should be laid aside, God's work would still be carried forward. I read from Hebrews again. Let us run with patience the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and the finisher of our faith. And back to the parable of the good ship Faith. The writer, as is found in 5 Testimonies, page 571, is addressing a pastor. You were on a strong ship sailing on very rough waters. Sometimes the waters beat over the deck and you were drenched with water. You said, I will get off this vessel, it's going down. No, said one who appeared to be the captain, this vessel sails into the harbor. She will never go down. But you answered and said, if I remain on this ship, I will be washed overboard. I will take my chances on that vessel, that ship over yonder. And the captain said, no, I will not let you go over there, for I know that that vessel will strike the rocks before she reaches the harbor. You replied with great positiveness, this vessel will become a wreck. I can see it just as plain as can be. And the captain looked upon you with piercing eye, and he said firmly, I shall not permit you to lose your life by taking that other ship. The timbers of her framework are worm-eaten. She is a deceptive craft. If you had more knowledge, you could clearly discern between the spurious and the genuine, between the holy and that which is appointed to utter room. Said the captain, this vessel sails into the harbor. She will never go down. You're in the right ship, the good ship, faith. But let's go back to our story now, the three images. And now, this time, it's the dream of Nebuchadnezzar, but human ambition dream, not a dream that he had during the night. The second great image. The dream of the great image opened before Nebuchadnezzar, events reaching to the close of time. The prosperity attending his reign filled him with pride. In time, he ceased to honor God, and he resumed his idol worship with increased zeal and bigotry. You know, when some people toss in the faith, they can become strong somewhere else. The wise men of his realm, taking advantage of this and his return to idolatry, proposed that he make an image similar to the one seen in his dream. He was pleased with this flattering suggestion, and he determined to carry it out and to go even further. His image would not deteriorate in value from the head to the feet, but it would be entirely made of gold, symbolic of Babylon as an eternal, all-powerful kingdom which would stand forever. The Chaldeans had never before produced anything so imposing and majestic as this resplendent statue. A decree went forth that on the day of dedication, everyone should show their supreme loyalty to the Babylonian power by bowing before this image. Word was brought to Nebuchadnezzar that there were some among his subjects who dared to disobey his mandate. Nebuchadnezzar endeavored by threats to induce them to unite with the multitude. The king's anger knew no bounds. Directing that the furnace be heated 7 times hotter, he commanded the mighty men of his army to bind the worshippers of Israel's true God, and they were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Nothing new in that whatsoever. You've heard the story before. You know what happened. But in summary, Nebuchadnezzar's dream, that is the divine revelation, the first great image, you know, gold, silver, brass, iron, clay. Your evangelistic meetings always tell you that story. And you've heard it in Sabbath school. You've heard it from this desk before. I have presented from this desk before. Then you heard the affirmation of faith, the parable of the good ship Faith. This vessel, says the captain, sails into the harbor. She will never go down. Then there was King Nebuchadnezzar's second dream, this time his human ambition, that great image that was there on the plains of Dura, and where the 3 Hebrew patriots were thrown in. And as I say, our topic for the day is the parable of the good ship Faith and the 3 great images. Very briefly, we look at the first great image, divine revelation in a dream to both Nebuchadnezzar and Daniel. Daniel simply had a rerun of the earlier one. This is the first great images. 3 years ago, I gave this story here. It's found in Daniel chapter 2. Nebuchadnezzar the king was about 30 years old. However, as I read in our writings, Daniel was but a youth when he was carried away into Babylon. He was about 15 or 16 years old, in our writings it is stated, when he was made a prisoner of war. He was taken through that cruel operation. However, 3 years later, Daniel was 18 years old when he became prime minister of the Babylonian Empire. Can you imagine this? He was a member of the royal family in Jerusalem, captured as a prisoner of war. He was a Jew, and he became the prime minister of an Arab empire. You got to believe it. But it was true. it did happen. Now, you know the story. I hardly need to go through it. You know, gold, silver, brass, iron, clay. Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, and then the breakup into the 10 nations of Europe, or more accurately and more completely in days to come, 10 provinces around planet Earth with a king at the head of each. This is what the scriptures tell us. This is what the writings tell us. We haven't gotten that far in politics in our world yet. That was the first image. Years went by, and Daniel chapter 3 tells us about this story. Maybe you can just keep your Bible open and sort of casually let your eyes wander over the information. Daniel chapter 2 is the great image of Daniel's interpretation. Daniel chapter 3 is the next great image. And Daniel chapter 3 tells us the story of this great image that was erected on the plains of Dura. Verse 1, chapter 3 of Daniel. Nebuchadnezzar, the king, made an image of gold. Okay? Verse 2. Then Nebuchadnezzar, the king, sent to gather all of the princes, governors, leaders, political leaders of every province in the Babylonian Empire. 127 provinces from India to Ethiopia. And I might add, we lived in one of those provinces for a period of time, the province that was called India, which we now know today as Pakistan. This is the story. By this time, Nebuchadnezzar is now about 40 years old. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are no longer teenagers. They're in their early 30s. Daniel is now 28 years old. 594 BC, in the 10th year of Nebuchadnezzar, there was a major mutiny in his empire, and the empire was falling apart. 593 BC, Nebuchadnezzar implemented a procedure to reunite the Babylonian Empire. You can read this in Mervyn Maxwell's book called Daniel. It's the compendium. He made one book on Daniel. He wrote another one on Revelation. You can read the story in Mervyn Maxwell's book on the story of Daniel. And so his advisors suggested to him, you had that dream of the great image with these different metals representing various kingdoms that are going to arise. Why don't you make an image like that, make it massive and huge, but instead of different metals, make it all of gold? Now, it was so large, it was impossible to make it all of gold. It was made of probably clay and erected, and then it was overlaid with gold, like the Buddhists do in Thailand today. And so this was erected down there. All rulers of the 127 provinces, all of the government officials were invited to come in, and then the information took place. If you turn in the book of Jeremiah, go back a little bit, the book of Jeremiah, chapter 51, verse 59, it will tell you there that the king from Israel went over for this occasion. Then Jeremiah 51 and looking at verse 59. The word which Jeremiah the prophet commanded Sariah, the son of Neriah, the son of Maaseiah, when he went with Zedekiah, the king of Judah, to Babylon in the 4th year of his reign. This Sariah was a quiet prince. But the king of Judah, God's people, as they were in those days, was commanded by Nebuchadnezzar, you've got to come over, bring your government officials, bring them over to Babylon. They've got to take part in the dedication of this massive image. Interestingly, Zedekiah was a close relative to Prince Daniel, and Zedekiah at this stage was about 25 years old, just a young man on the throne of the province of Judah. The golden statue was made 90 feet tall, 9 foot wide, overlaid with gold, almost as tall with its pedestal as the Statue of Liberty. And as I mentioned 3 years ago with this information that we're covering very briefly today, archaeologist Julius Oppert did some survey work south of Babylon about a little over 100 years ago, and he found the remains of a squared mound 56 feet wide, 56 feet broad, and 20 feet high. And he said in his writings that this had to be the platform upon which this massive statue was placed for this occasion. You know the story. It's been told in children's Sabbath school lessons and in worship service children's stories. Prophets and Kings 5:09. Nebuchadnezzar descended from his throne and going to the mouth of the furnace cried out, "Ye servants of the Most High God, come forth." Not Lazarus come forth, "Ye servants of the Most God, come forth." Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came forth before the vast multitude, showing themselves unhurt. Now, it's quite remarkable. We read a little while ago that Nebuchadnezzar commanded that the fire should be heated up 7 times. How do you make a fire 7 times hotter? But don't forget, remember that the 3 men who were cast in were Sabbath keepers. There's a 7 in there somewhere, isn't there? And so Nebuchadnezzar was angry with these Sabbath keepers, keeping the 7th-day Sabbath. All right, we're going to heat the furnace up 7 times hotter. You're going into that. They went in. The Lord God, Creator, spent time with them. And then Nebuchadnezzar descended from his throne, not just a chair sitting out in the desert floor, some great majestic appointment where he was seen by all and every. And then he came down off his throne, went to the mouth of the furnace, and then he commanded, "You servants of the Most High God, come out." How did he know? Who were the 4th person in that furnace? He said it was one that looked like the God of heaven. You see, in his dream, 10 years earlier, he had seen the second coming. And he saw Jesus coming in the second coming. And now this same being who will come at the end of our earth's history was with Nebuchadnezzar in that area, and particularly with those 3 Hebrew young men, all princes in the royal family, and gave a witness before the massive congregation that was there. You know what happened? Nebuchadnezzar then wrote a book of the Bible, chapter 4, I should say a chapter of the Bible. Daniel chapter 4 was written by an idol-worshipping, Sunday-observing Arab king. You've got to be kidding. But it's there. It's there. And when Daniel put it in the Bible, it was accurate information. We find in our writings some historical information that's inserted into great controversy. The author chose information that was accurate and correct and put it in there. I do the same thing with the scripts that I write for radio broadcast worldwide. And my program, as you know, is a secular program to encourage people to listen to the religious programming. And we get letters from people around the planet. Now, here is the information regarding these things as we see it given this way. As a result of that, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came forth before the vast multitude, showing themselves unhurt. Most remarkable. The tidings of their wonderful deliverance was carried to many countries by the representatives of the different nations that had been invited by Nebuchadnezzar to the dedication. Through the faithfulness of these 3 young men, God was glorified in all the earth. Remarkable. Now, the great image stole the story that is told in evangelistic efforts, accurate and true. The great image that was made, and those 3 men were thrown into the furnace, an excellent children's story. But there's a lot more to it than just simply an evangelistic meeting to encourage people to understand history, excellent though that be. It is far more than simply a children's story to gain the interest of the children that they can remember some good things about the information in Scripture, excellent though that be. There is much more to these things in this way. The third great image. I read now a modern parallel. 7 Bible Commentary 976. This is the story. It happened long ago, as you know, back 500 and 600 years BC originally. But I read now this statement right down in our own modern era, very close to the end of all things. 7 Bible Commentary, 976. History will be repeated. The first day of the week, a common working day, will be set up as was the image of Babylon. Can you not see now? That dream long, long ago that foretold the future, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, and then the 10 nations of Europe, and then the 10 provinces of planet Earth. There's more to it than that. Then there was the image on the plains of Dura where a copy was made, but it was made all in gold, and everybody had to worship it. I read again. History will be repeated. The first day of the week, a common working day, will be set up like the image of Babylon. All nations and tongues and peoples will be commanded to worship this spurious Sabbath. That is the third image. Sunday worship, as it will be commanded, yet ahead of us. We haven't come to that time yet ahead of us. Important, and if you want more affirmation of these things, I read from Prophets and Kings, 512. Important are the lessons to be learned from the experience of the Hebrew young people on the plain of Dura. You know, that's the fiery furnace story. In this our day, now it's true, that was written a little while ago. In this our day, many of God's servants, though innocent of wrongdoing, will be given over to suffer humiliation and abuse at the hands of those who are filled with envy and religious bigotry. Especially will the wrath of man be aroused against those who hallow the Sabbath of the fourth commandment. No wonder the Sabbath school lessons contained an important lesson today on the subject of the Sabbath and its meaning to us as worshiping Christians in the world of today. But notice that the command to worship upon the Sabbath day is a forecasted, a prophesied event, and that it is paralleled with the image of Babylon. I will read that sentence one again. The first day of the week, a common working day, will be set up, as was the image of Babylon. Now, what about the magnitude and the intensity of coming events? 5 Testimonies 7:11. A great crisis awaits the people of God. A crisis awaits the world. The most momentous struggle of all the ages is just before us. We are coming to a crisis which more than any previous time since the world began, the worst crisis upon the planet Earth, even greater than in the pre-flood era. We are coming to a crisis which more than any previous time since the world began will demand the entire consecration of everyone who has named the name of Christ. Where do you fit into this story? Where do I fit into this story? Do we know enough about these things? Is our commitment at a level required by the events that are yet before us? We are coming to a crisis which more than any previous time since the world began will demand the entire consecration of everyone who has named the name of Christ. A crisis awaits the world. The most momentous struggle of all the ages is just before us. Another statement, the world is on the verge of a stupendous crisis. Another statement, a storm is coming, relentless in its fury. Another statement, the conflict that is right upon us will be the most terrible ever witnessed. Another statement, we who know the truth should be preparing for what is soon to break upon the world as an overwhelming surprise. Why is this church not filled with people searching for the Word of God? Amen. Many of you people are trying that way. Your pastor is trying. Your evangelists are trying. We who know the truth should be preparing for what is soon to break upon the world as an overwhelming surprise. We are approaching stormy times, great controversy. Now, I have mentioned previously, and you'll notice that all of the topics that are being presented in last day events are linked together. It's not possible to tell all of these things on one occasion. They linked together and presented one by one. But I told the story of the time of Jacob's trouble, and that God's people, should I say back then, in the time of Israel, Jacob, were caught between the king of the north and the king of the south. And you'll remember that in that event long ago, that Jacob and his entourage, his 12 wives, his 4 wives, I should say, strange situation, isn't it? He and his 4 wives and 12 sons and 1 daughter were caught between the king of the north and the king of the south. The king of the north, as far as he was concerned, back there at that ancient time, were relatives, similar religion, but they had idol worship mixed with it. Don't you remember one of the wives had stolen an idol, and she pretended to be, she was on the camel and didn't want to get off, and she had hidden it in the baggage. They were worshiping in a similar way to Jacob, but they had idolatry mixed with it. Do you know a Christian religion in our world today that is similar? It believes in Christianity, but it has idol worship? The commandments tell us not to worship idols. You and I know that. And so that was the king of the north. The king of the south, that was his brother, with an army of more than 300 men coming out to exterminate them all. His brother had a desert religion, similar to what Jacob had, but not the same, a desert religion. Do you know a desert religion in our world of today? I don't need to mention the name, do I? And in our world ahead of us, God's people will be caught between the king of the north and the king of the south. And there are 3 days of worship. One is Friday, another day is Saturday, not exactly total Saturday, the Sabbath, and the third one is Sunday. The middle day is the one that is the true Sabbath, and God's people will be caught in the midst between these 2 organizations in the events that are yet to come to us. Now, the Sunday issue, let's look at that. We go back to Genesis chapter 2, verse 3. You hardly need to turn it up, you know what it says. God blessed the 7th day and sanctified it. And our General Conference President emphasizes the importance of creation. I read Patriarchs and Prophets. The Sabbath was committed to Adam. Its observance was to be an act of grateful acknowledgement that God was their creator and their rightful sovereign. Now, you know the story in the Garden of Eden. Eve was deceived. I suppose we can criticize her for that. But we ought to be a little bit careful about criticizing relatives. It's not a very good idea, is it? Eve was deceived. She took the fruit out to Adam. He took it. What was he going to do? Here he was. There are 2 human beings upon planet Earth, no more. And his wife, whom he loved and appreciated, and she was a very pretty girl, there's no doubt about that. This wife that he loved and appreciated had wandered the wrong way. Just a simple procedure. Was he going to be separated from her, or was he going to join her? Where was her love? Where was his love? I talked to mature men in our congregation who are married. You have a wife, I have a wife whom I love. You have a wife that you love. Adam loved his wife, and he made a mistake. He shouldn't have done it, but he chose to go with her into the direction she had taken. I guess we ought not to criticize him either, because after all, it's not wise to criticize our relatives. The Sabbath was committed to Adam. Its observance was to be an act of grateful acknowledgement that God was their creator and their rightful sovereign. Interestingly, I read about Cain. Cain and his descendants in the era before the flood did not respect the day upon which God had rested, the Sabbath day. They chose their own time for labor and their own time for rest. Interestingly, there is some reason to believe that in the era before the flood, Cain and his followers chose not to worship on the Sabbath, not to have the day of rest on the Sabbath, but on the next day, which of course would be Sunday. There was a divine prophecy, Daniel 7:25, he will think to change times and laws. Revelation 13:15-17, the mark of the beast, you know about that. Evangelism 2:34, the mark of the beast is the papal Sabbath, which has been accepted by the world in the place of God's appointment. Now, when Moses was upon that mount, not the Mount of Sinai, where he received the Ten Commandments, but this time at his farewell from planet Earth, as it were. When Moses was there, God gave him a vision, and he saw the world in our day, right down here. He was living way back then, died way back then, but he saw what would be happening in our day. He was horrified, according to the writings, to learn that people claiming to be Christians had changed the day of worship. But then he was pleasantly surprised to find that there was a small company, and sometimes I think we're a bit small in some places, aren't we? There was a small company that were honoring the Lord. Moses saw the Sabbath trodden underfoot and a spurious institution established in its place. Moses was filled with astonishment and horror. How could those who believed in Christ reject the law that was spoken by his own voice upon the sacred mount? I've been there, but it was 2,500 years after this. How could any that feared God set aside his law, which is the foundation of his government in heaven and earth? With joy, Moses saw the law of God still honored and exalted, at least by a faithful few. Now the final great test, Revelation chapter 12, verse 17. The dragon was earth, we would say it will be. The dragon was wroth with the woman and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus. The Sabbath question is to be the issue and the great final conflict in which all the world will act a part. The last great conflict between truth and error is but the final struggle of the long-standing controversy concerning the law of God. Sunday keeping is not yet the mark of the beast. We understand that. The time will come when this day will be the test, but that time has not yet come. No, not yet. This solemn period is not far off, when the decree shall go forth enforcing the counterfeit Sabbath. The line will be clearly drawn between the false and the true. Those who continue in transgression will receive the mark of the beast. When our nation, I suppose if I'm reading this correctly, I should say when your nation, or when our borrowed nation, from my wife and myself. But anyway, the writings say, when our nation shall enact laws enforcing Sunday observance, the law of God will be made void in our land, and national apostasy will be followed by national ruin. There are strange laws being enacted in this country at the present time regarding the marriage institution. These will increase, we know, and then the Sunday will become the next thing. The papal Sabbath will be enforced by the combined authority of church and state. There will be a national apostasy which will end only in national ruin. I've said it before, the only era of decent living in the entire history of planet Earth has been the American era. And that's over. That's over. I read another statement, and listen carefully. The Protestant world will learn what the purposes of Rome really are only when it is too late to escape the snare. She is piling up her lofty and massive structures in the secret recesses of which her former persecutions will be repeated. Read it in Great Controversy, page 581, and stop and think about it, what that really means to you, to me, and to planet Earth. The final call, Revelation 18:4. John said, I heard another voice out of heaven saying, come out of her, my people. There is a call to the people who love God that are serving in other denominations. Come out of Babylon. Come out of her, my people. Large numbers will be admitted who in these last days hear the truth for the first time. Multitudes will receive the faith and join the armies of the Lord. A large number will take their stand upon the Lord's side. We can be grateful for that. Spread the word around. Spread the literature. What about God's counsel for his people? As we approach this last great crisis, it is of vital importance that harmony and unity exist among the Lord's people. No wonder the General Conference President says that Adventists should get their act together and come together in unity. He's just quoting our writings. When the decree is issued against commandment keepers, the people of God will flee from the cities and the villages, and they will associate together in companies, dwelling in the most desolate and solitary places. Hardly any place in this country is desolate and isolated. We'll have to wait and see what happens. There are stormy times before us, but let us not utter one word of discouragement. Identifying mark, Revelation 14:12. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and hold the faith of Jesus. Prophets and Kings 5:1-3. In the closing period of earth's history, the Lord will work mightily in behalf of those who stand steadfastly for the right. He who walked with the Hebrew worthies in the furnace, here is this illustration again, the third great image, Sabbath, Sunday worship. In the closing periods of earth's history, the Lord will work mightily in behalf of those who stand steadfastly for the right. He who walked with the Hebrew worthies in the furnace will be with his followers wherever they are. His abiding presence will comfort and sustain. He is able to save to the uttermost those who have put their trust in him. That's a quotation from Hebrews, isn't it? A Bible statement. The three great images. Nebuchadnezzar's great image, the great dream. That was a divine presentation. There was Nebuchadnezzar's second image, the real one that they constructed, standing nearly as tall as the Statue of Liberty. And then the third great image will be Sunday worship, in which God's people will be caught between the king of the north and the king of the south. Some people have been asking, then what is the preparation that we should make? An Adventist pastor from Andrews University visited the church at Eastview, and he preached there. And I might state that Adventist congregations in Indiana are appreciative of the fact that the sermons that are presented from this desk, those that I present, those that your pastor presents, are available on the internet. And there are many people in our congregations that are now getting onto the internet to watch the presentations that are made here in this situation. Thank you for giving the opportunity this way, and thank you for identifying the speaker and the topic in the list that is given on the internet. But this visiting Adventist pastor from Andrews University was preaching at Eastview. Last Sabbath, my wife and I were at Kokomo. Next Sabbath, we're scheduled to preach. I'm scheduled to preach at Eastview, down there on the edge of Bloomington. And this pastor presented a sermon in which he said, we ought not to be thinking about getting ready. We should be thinking about being ready. So if that is the case, what do we do to be ready? It's a simple story again. Nothing new anywhere. Get your eyes into the books. Get your life into the Adventist lifestyle. Get your prayers into the ways of eternity. Get your experience into a living, viable faith. But that's not new. You've known it from before the time when you were baptized. I read one sentence again, one or a double sentence regarding the good ship Faith. Said the captain, this vessel sails into the harbor. She will never go down. Can you say amen to that? Amen. We sang earlier, all creatures of our God and King, and I chose to have that hymn identified in the bulletin as, "Oh, praise him," and surely we should praise him. And now we sing another hymn, which is number 626 in our book. In a little while, we're going home. Yes, their official title, In a Little While, if you like, but we're going home. That's the title I like to have for this hymn as we sing. We invite you to stand as we sing.